Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 103. I'm joined today by the head coach at Strathclyde University and football consultant, Barry Rodgers. Barry, how are you?
I'm well, Ben, thanks. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. This one has been one of those that we've been trying to get this in the books for a hell of a long time now. This has been a number of months, so thank you for your patience and finally coming on.
No problem. No, it's good to be here. Looking forward to having a chat.
Awesome, mate. Well, do you want to kick us off? Because I've just mentioned there, you're head coach at Strathclyde University, but also football consultant. And I know there's plenty of other details for you to discuss within that. So do you want to just give us a bit of a roundup on your career so far and then what you're currently doing as well?
Yeah. So I've been working in the game for about 15 years now. Just kind of started through a passion for the game, playing it as a young player. Played at a kind of couple of pro youth clubs when I was younger. Never really amounted to anything in the game, but kind of found a route and path into coaching through college and university. So through my kind of studies and things, I started out doing an internship at Celtic in Glasgow. So through there, kind of picked up some work in the community programmes, a little bit of the development centres with the boys' academy, and then predominantly with the kind of women's academy as well. So the university, I was fortunate enough to kind of start working at such a big club. From there, through the kind of women's pathway, I had an opportunity to join Glasgow City, the kind of predominant women's team in Scotland. So they were a kind of full-time programme, and was working with their 17s to kind of reserve team squads, and then fortunate enough to work with their first team as well. Same time as that, I was also working in a kind of dual programme as well. So I was kind of working a dual full-time programme at Glasgow City, and also an organisation called EduSport Academy. It's quite a unique project, EduSport Academy, where they bring French football players to Scotland on scholarship programmes. They train full-time, and they also study, kind of taking English classes and other studies as well through the scholarship. They also play in kind of tier 5 of the kind of Scottish football pyramid. So that was quite an interesting period, because it was almost working with two full-time squads at the same time. So I was almost kind of doing 10 to 12 training sessions a week, a couple of games a week as well. Quite intense, but it was good for my own development. I was lucky enough at Glasgow City that we were involved in the Women's Champions League as well, so we got to kind of participate against teams like Fortuna, Arsenal, PSG. So it was really good for kind of experience at the top level of the women's game there. From there, I continued in the women's game to Stirling University, competing in the Women's Premier League 1 in Scotland, but also competing in the top Universities League in the UK. So again, that was quite an intense programme. We would be playing in the Women's Premier League at the weekend, and then we would be travelling to the likes of Birmingham, Leeds, Durham, during the week as well. So that was quite interesting, being able to kind of manage a kind of dual programme from there. And then recently, for the past kind of 2.5 years, I've been kind of developing my own little kind of programme, Total Football Academy. Kind of design and implement club consultancy for some kind of boys and women's grassroots clubs in Scotland, and also advising players from kind of grassroots to semi-pro, and also kind of pro in the women's game on a kind of one-to-one basis, helping out with their training programs, development programs, and head coach at Strathclyde University men's team now as well, just to kind of keep myself inside that kind of team environment and bubble. So yeah, keeping busy and just kind of involved in kind of day-to-day ins and outs of football, which is obviously kind of why we're all involved, the kind of passion and enjoyment for it.
Yeah, I know you certainly got plenty going on, Barry, which is what we spoke about on our call just a few weeks back, which is why it's great to have you on, because you're someone that's got experience in the men's game, in the female game, but then a part-time and full-time program as well. So it's great to delve into your experiences in those. So when we set out with this podcast, I wanted to get people on in different roles that could have an impact on football fitness. And for me, that's a wide range of practitioners. It's not just a sports scientist, it's not just an S&C coach, but then again, it's not just a technical coach. So where would you say you fit on that sort of, what was your role be more technical at the moment, or where would you see you fit on that scale?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, Ben. Something I've kind of thought about recently myself is, what is a head coach, what is an assistant coach, what is a head of performance. And I think certainly from kind of my point of view, in my opinion, as a football professional, I think you have to be, it's great to specialise in one kind of particular area. But I think it's important as well to kind of be a master of your craft and have good knowledge in all areas. So that you're kind of taking a holistic approach. Certainly for me, my kind of passion is being part of that kind of team environment. Obviously, I've been an assistant coach in terms of the performance side of it. My kind of past 2 roles in the team environment has been as a head coach. So that's certainly given me a kind of an eye-opener, a different view of the kind of pressures of kind of being a head coach and what that entails. It's obviously more kind of people management and kind of top-down guiding processes and cultures, for example. I've got a keen interest in, kind of the planning and methodology of training. I think as a head coach, yeah, you do have to have a wide view of that, but I think it's more kind of for assistant and head of performance coaches that, you are being a master of your craft. You know the ins and outs and all the small details to create that. So I think for me, certainly recently, the past couple of years, I've kind of went down that path of, methodology, football periodisation, a bit of tactical periodisation as well, kind of in the process of doing some online training through kind of the periodisation models as well. So yeah, certainly head coach, but a little bit of that kind of assistant high performance coach as well. I think I would say my current kind of ideas are.
Yeah, definitely, and that's it's something we spoke about recently on the podcast, because the role of performance coach or performance manager, that seems to be becoming more popular at the moment, doesn't it? And what sort of practitioner fits into that is quite interesting, because it can be a number of different people. But I think you're dead right, is that the sort of modern day coaching or modern day coach for me needs to at least understand all the different roles that there are and the different responsibilities. But at the same time, like you said, having a specialty is another argument, isn't it? And having a specialist area. So it is very interesting, which is why I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can help with, certainly help with communication as well. I would always kind of think of it as, when you look at a business, you've got a kind of CEO who kind of oversees the full project, and then you've got 5 or 6 different departments within that business, and if all of those 5 different departments are individuals and are specialists within there, then it can certainly be the communication can kind of be lacking within the business. Whereas if all kind of 5 departments. You have your specialities within your specific department, within the business, but you also have a knowledge of what the other 4 or 5 departments are doing, what their roles are, what their jobs are, and how that connects to your own department. Then, you know, the communication within the business in this example, you know, it just functions so much better, you know, and across the board, the communication's better, you know, and the team performance is better as well, and obviously implementing that to a team structure or a club organisation environment, for example.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to dive in to start with, because you mentioned about your business that you've set up, Total Football Academy. So we were going to talk about one-to-one coaching, because it's something, again, that's come up time and time again recently, the need for individualisation within a programme, and the need in terms of from the player's point of view. We've spoke about this a lot. We spoke about it a lot in episode 100 with Tom Allen and Matt Taberner. The need players want or need of individualising programs. So it's obviously something that you are focusing on within your business. So what's your approach to that?
Yeah, so one part of this, in terms of kind of things I work on, is kind of working with some women's Premier League players, individual players, who are either in a part-time, semi-pro or full-time environment. So for me, I've seen the values of working kind of one-to-one with players. What I always like to do though is have the team environment as the starting point, basically. Obviously the game of football, it's a team game. So that for me, that always has to be the starting point. Now, taking the team game to an individual is kind of two ends of the spectrum. So taking the kind of game as the starting point, I always try to use that to filter down to the individual. So a lot of the stuff I would kind of do with individual players would be making sure that their training session that I do with them is periodised in terms of the plan, the training week that they have with their team. So kind of screening the player to start with. What has your training been like this week? When have your most intense sessions been? How much game time did you have at the weekend? And then periodising their plan from there, always using kind of football as the starting point, trying to have as much decision making and focus on technical execution within the training session, and then also kind of using that to develop the kind of football fitness. So within that, there'll be a lot of kind of obviously ball manipulation, because a one-to-one session is really intense. They're basically doing all the work within the session that within a team session, the teammates will be doing some of the work as well. So the work to rest ratios are kind of vital, and that again is tailored to what the player has done throughout the week in terms of training and games. Again, in terms of the kind of technical execution, try to make it as much there is a little bit of kind of falsification, because decision making within an individual session is not really achievable, because there's no team environment, unless you're maybe working with 2 players at the one time, there's not really decision making to be had within there. But trying to put the players in scenarios where they understand, this could happen within a game, or that could happen within a game. There's no hard and fast rules in terms of, I want you to do this, and this is exactly what's going to happen within the game. It's just trying to kind of give them a picture or an idea of different scenarios that could arise within the game, and then kind of taken into the individual football fitness. We're kind of working, depending on the time of season, for example, in pre-season, we could be working on kind of explosive preparation exercises, building players up to being able to do full sprints. It could be within obviously at this time currently kind of in pre-season, building up to be able to kind of do full sprints within sessions, and obviously within games, and then kind of hitting the in season, where we'll be working on maybe kind of football sprints for maintaining quality within games and within sessions, and also sprints for kind of, like I said, kind of quality, and then obviously kind of with maximum rest, and then minimum rest, depending on the kind of fatigue of the player and the time of the week. So that's a kind of overview of how we would put all of that into a kind of package. Again, it's subjective in terms of where the player is within the season, what they're doing within the kind of team environment, and try to kind of keep it as close as possible to the game, which is obviously the game is the best trainer for a football player. But try to kind of mould that into working with them on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff in there, and I want to just take you back to the start where you mentioned about, because I've got a few things to pick out from that, but the first thing is where you mentioned about screening. So getting the player in, screening the player, and I'm guessing part of that is going to be like verbal in terms of finding out, like you've touched on then, where they are in the season, what they've been doing, how many minutes they've played, things like that. But in terms of like actual physical screening, how would that look for yourself?
Yeah, I think just to go back to, if I take pre-season as a starting point, for example, the players, they may have a programme to do in their off-season, kind of working away. I think for me, I would maybe take a kind of safety-first approach. But the players coming back, they're probably at the most freshest they're going to be within a season, having that break. But they're probably going to be kind of the least fit that they'll be throughout the season. So things, for example, the kind of explosive preparation exercises that I kind of mentioned there would be, building up to full sprinting. So, for example, starting off working up to 60% of a player's maximum sprint, and then week by week gradually working up to 100% of that kind of player's maximum sprint, not just kind of in terms of acceleration, but also in terms of deceleration, which is obviously kind of a high percentage within games and training as well. I think within the sessions, I always kind of rely on I would kind of use that as a guide within there, but also I think, which is kind of undervalued and kind of visually, screening a player physically, is the coach's eye. How are they able to cope with the, for example, the starting point, which is these explosive preparation exercises? Can you see the player, are they struggling to recover between these actions? Can you see them, are they breathing heavy within these actions? Are they fully recovered the time they're doing the next action within their kind of work to rest ratio? Is, like say physically and visually kind of screening them, is their face red? How heavy are they breathing? And then from there, it's just a case of kind of gradual build up. Speaking with the player, finding out what from them, how intense they felt the session. And it's quite a difficult one as well, because you could be working with different players from different clubs, and different clubs have different training programs. They have different views and philosophies on how to train players as well. So it's trying to get an idea from the player what they're doing at their club as well, and what they're doing on specific days, and just kind of having some different exercises prepared for them and up your sleeve, that you can see if a player is maybe struggling, then you can maybe do a less intensive exercise. You can do more of an extensive exercise, which is going to have less actions per minute, and then kind of more recovery between actions as well. So there's a little bit of juggling as well for each individual, because it's kind of so specialised. But it's good, and it's challenging as well, because it always kind of it helps you learn. It helps you kind of work in that individual environment as well with the individual player.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely more practitioners and coaches that are going to be running businesses or working in that way, isn't there? That working with individuals. And I think what you said about not having the real life situations because you've only got one player, that's an interesting discussion as well, isn't it? Because obviously the stimulus out on the pitch in terms of the ball, in terms of teammates, opposition, there's a lot going on, isn't there? And when you suddenly have one player out there with you, it removes a lot of that, doesn't it? So to make it specific to a match situation is going to be hard, but at the same time, there's things you can do and things you can work on, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, there's a lot of kind of basic actions, that you can do within the sessions. Mentioned ball manipulation as well. It's an intense session because the player is there, they're on their own. They're not maybe having to stand in a queue of 3 or 4 players that they would do at a team session. There's a repetition there, and then depending on where the player is within the week, is it maybe a longer recovery or is it maybe a more intensive session where they've done their repetition and then bang, 10 seconds minimum recovery, and then they're back into it. And I think that's where there is a big kind of, call for it and a want for it from players, because you can see that, within a session, a player might not get that attention for the full hour in terms of a team session, but you're there working with them and you can see that the players, I feel players always enjoy working. They always enjoy feeling that at the end of a session that they've done something, or they've really worked out, and sometimes within a recovery session with a team, you sometimes don't feel as if that you've done that work. It is necessary. Obviously, a recovery session is very necessary, but within that kind of one-to-one situation, players, using a kind of general term, they feel as if they've had that kind of sharpness with the ball manipulation, and it does kind of boost confidence in terms of then going into their team session knowing that they've had that extra preparation, kind of in that individual environment.
Yeah, and the next bit we wanted to move on to, Barry, because there's still plenty we could go into on the individual coaching side, but I'm just worried that a big part of the podcast we wanted to talk about was periodisation. Now there's a million different ways we can go with this, but I wanted to just start out by asking you about your views on periodisation, because you see a lot of people posting about this topic, some saying it's undervalued, some saying it's overvalued. So where do your views sit? And then we can sort of break down models and your views on that.
Yeah, I think when you look at the term, obviously there's a lot of terms out there, that are banded about and things like that, but I think you need to kind of simplify periodisation to start with. And I think, a lot of coaches or teams maybe look at what they're doing. They all will be practicing periodisation to a certain extent, and I think you need to look at periodisation and what it means to start with, and it's basically just the planning and execution of all training and games, basically. So it's your preparation and planning within your week, within your training session, within your game preparation, how you're managing players individually, how you're managing the team individually. So it is there. And I think when you bring all that together, the term for that is periodisation. Obviously, there is some kind of different models that you can use out there, historical models and more contemporary models. Obviously, there's the kind of football periodisation model, and you have tactical periodisation model. There's some different kind of practitioners out there, and from kind of Barcelona, Packer Suralo, in terms of his cognitive periodisation model as well. So there are different kind of, models out there. In terms of my kind of studies and kind of how I've kind of worked with them practically on the field, kind of biggest ones that I've used in studies of, obviously the kind of football periodisation model derived from obviously Raymond Verhagen and how he's kind of developed it, and then the kind of tactical periodisation model. A lot of kind of high level coaches through Mourinho and then Rodgers kind of taking that from Vitor Frade, which is obviously a kind of Portuguese periodisation model. My views on it, and kind of through some of the, I've been participating recently in the football periodisation mentorship and online pro course. I was actually supposed to go to Germany in March there before all the kind of shutdown. So I was going there to study kind of football tactics and periodisation evolution. So through my kind of studies of that, the football periodisation model, and I was introduced this kind of to start with when I started working at Glasgow City, and I really seen the effectiveness of how, it's great to have really good individual players, but if you have a team that's functioning to the peak of their capabilities and their top fitness, not just at certain stages of the season, but gradually building up towards kind of business end of the season, and having a programme that goes into such minute detail in terms of how you periodise your week, where you have your different intensities within the week, and also your methodology within each training session. So it's not just about having a subjective opinion and saying, well, I feel that within the week, we play the game on a Sunday. I want to have my recovery session on a Tuesday, and then I'm going to do my most intensive session on a Wednesday, and then I'm going to do my more tactical work Friday, Saturday in preparation for my game next week on a Sunday. That's kind of based on just how a coach perceives or how a coach thinks, using their experience, they should prepare their week. Whereas using kind of football as a starting point from the kind of football periodisation model, using the kind of the hierarchy of using communication, decision making, execution, and then using that as the full kind of football fitness programme. I've seen kind of through my experience practically on the pitch, you know, when I kind of first was introduced to it through kind of being at Glasgow City and working with some different coaches, how effective it can be. And like I say, it's an objective application using football as the starting point. Football, the starting point for football is the same at all levels. All teams attack, all teams defend, and all teams transition in between, no matter if you're at the top level or in grassroots. That is the kind of starting point for football, and it's quite interesting how specific and minute the details are through the football periodisation methodology, in terms of within the week, are you doing an intensive on an extensive warm-up within your session? Are you doing an intensive or extensive passing exercise? Again, possession exercises, are they intensive, extensive? And also, what type of games are you using within the week that are going to hit all the different areas of the kind of football fitness as well? And that is really pushing the team and individuals to the kind of limits of their kind of capacity as well. And instead of just kind of subjectively saying, right, okay, today I feel like doing this type of possession exercise, I'm going to do 3 blocks of 4 minutes and I'm going to give them a rest of 1 minute in between. It's actually so detailed within the sessions and the progression throughout the season that your team is going to be keeping top fitness but also maintaining their freshness as well. So that's just kind of an overview of my experience in terms of the football periodisation model, which is obviously kind of more, it's a subjective application of an objective football reference.
And I think it would be great, Barry, if we could relate it to your current role. So if you're happy to go into some details about how you've practically made that work within your current role, because I'm guessing are the players at the moment, they're part-time, obviously being university players.
Yeah.
Part-time program.
So it's part-time program, and that's kind of been well, the past 2 roles I've had have been in kind of university football, and you can see it as part-time, but throughout the week, the players I'm working with just now, it's basically for a large majority of the season, they have a double game week, so they'll be competing on a Wednesday within their university league, but they'll also be competing in a league at the weekend as well, which within itself is obviously a challenge to kind of manage 2 games a week, kind of week in, week out. So, for example, at the minute, we'll have a game on a Saturday, a day off on a Sunday, we'll come in and train on a Monday, and then we'll have a game on a Wednesday. We'll have a session on a Thursday, a day off on a Friday, and then we'll play a game on a Saturday. So it's quite intensive in terms of game train, and obviously trying to kind of maintain that kind of recovery in between and the freshness. So for me, I see it as being quite difficult in terms of having high intensity sessions within the week, because the players don't have any issue with maintaining their fitness because they are playing 2 11 90-minute games per week. Where we kind of struggle is trying to get intensity, so more actions. So it's difficult to do any sort of small-sided games, intense sessions, when basically the players are coming in on a Monday night from playing on a Saturday, and they are basically just recovering and preparing. They're not fully recovered from the game on the Saturday to go and then do any sort of intensity. Then we have to be mindful of, we have a game on a Wednesday as well, avoiding overtraining, so that they're fresh again for the Wednesday. And then basically from Wednesday to Saturday, we have a 2-day turnaround. Thursday is basically just a recovery session, working on playing style development, and then coming back into playing on a Saturday. So whenever we have a neutral game week where we don't have a Wednesday game or we don't have a Saturday game, then that would be your window to do a more high intensity session, whether that is looking at football sprints with maximum or minimum rest, small-sided games, looking for that intensity, or maybe a larger-sided game. But like I said, because of so many 90-minute games within the season, and we don't have any issue with kind of maintaining our fitness towards the end of games. It's more kind of high level of intense action within the games as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. This is going to relate a lot to a lot of listeners, I think, because we've had a lot of people getting in touch that are in either like semi-professional or part-time programs, and to hear people's approaches, because essentially your players they're playing on a full-time program, aren't they? Twice a week is what full-time players would do, but they're only training on a part-time program. So it's really interesting, isn't it, to keep, like you say, maintaining that fitness, but achieving that intensity is I'm guessing is a real battle for you.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well because a lot of the Wednesday teams we'll compete against are in the same situation. You know, they're students, they're high level, you know, they're decent level players, but they're students, but they'll be playing Wednesday and also Saturday. But when we go to play against teams who are playing on a Saturday, they basically just have a weekly programme. So it's kind of semi-pro, kind of amateur level, where they'll be playing Saturday, and they'll have a good training week together. They'll be fresh, and you'll be going in to compete against a team who've had a full week to prepare, whereas you've had kind of one session to prepare. You're basically damage control from the previous game and just trying to kind of manage the players going into the next game. So it's challenging. You can see it taking effect sometimes as well, where you're kind of, you're kind of doing your best you can, putting your hands up and saying, this, we're at the limits of what we can do here, and just trying to manage the programme. But from a kind of coach development point of view, it's really good because you need to be on the ball with your methodology and your planning and all aspects of kind of the team environment.
And just on that, I think it'd be interesting. How was the programme What did the program look like when you first stepped into that role? Was it very different to now? Was it something that you had to suddenly put a new methodology in place, or was it running similar to how it is now?
Yeah, when I went in, I didn't have a great idea of exactly how it looked before. Through kind of speaking to players, coaches previously, etc. I didn't, they did have the program there was kind of more focused on kind of university side, the Wednesday games within there, and just allowing the kind of the weekend stuff to kind of be as it is. I don't believe they had the kind of methodology and the periodisation, and something that I think can be quite challenging is, for example, if players played on a Saturday, they come in and trying to get players to understand that it's important that they recover and keep themselves fresh for going into a game on the Wednesday. I always feel that players want to come into a session and they want to go in and feel as if they've done something, they've worked hard and they've got something out of it. And I think that is important to have that intensity, but I think you always have to be mindful of they have to be fresh for the next game. So trying to not force that down players' throats, understand what the kind of culture was there previously, and give the players the references to understand, that this is geared towards the best preparation from them, and more so kind of guiding them and not basically saying, listen, this is how it's going to be, and it's this or nothing. Kind of trying to kind of guide them towards allowing them to have ideas and their input as well, because I think that's important that they've got skin in the game and it's theirs as well. But kind of trying to guide your ideas and your methodology to kind of make them understand that it's important that they're kind of fit and fresh as well.
Yeah, that freshness is really, really important, isn't it? And you mentioned before that they're going to be maintaining that football fitness throughout the season, playing twice a week anyway. So it's just getting them to understand that, isn't it? But I know you're dead right with that. Players want to come in and they want to go through really tough sessions every time. Otherwise, they feel like they're not doing that much, don't they? So it's just that it is that education part, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is important. Yeah. It's a balancing. It is a balancing act, and it's almost, instead of kind of speaking to them and telling them, allowing them to experience it, and maybe doing a really intense session in between two games, and letting them experience how they feel and maybe the performance. And players will keep going, but you can certainly see, players towards the end of games or the intensity of the actions. You can see that they will be struggling with that fatigue and the accumulation of fatigue as well. So maybe not just explaining it to them, but allowing them to experience it can help as well.
And I'm guessing that's why it's great to work at the university level, is because you can do things like that, can't you? Because at a full-time professional level, it's going to be harder to implement something like that, isn't it? But with the university players, that's a great way of educating, isn't it? To actually put them through that.
Yeah. I think doing that, you would always be mindful. You don't want to overtrain players or purposely overtrain them to kind of, accumulate fatigue or whatever. But having that line, or maybe just having that idea that you can bring up a situation within a game to a player and say, listen, because we're having these so many games in so short succession and doing intense training sessions, this is affecting your performance. And definitely it's all about kind of trial and error, and finding what works within your environment and in your culture, from there. And I think that's how you understand what works. You kind of get that eureka moment where you say that this is kind of what works within this environment and this culture.
And that sort of ties in with one thing I wanted to ask as well on the periodisation, is that you obviously mentioned the different models that are out there and that are available, and I'm sure some people have heard of some people haven't. And when you mentioned about the cognitive, that's an area that I don't know too much about. So in terms of as a coach, sort of selecting which model you're going to go with, what's your approach to that? Because there's so much information out there, isn't there? That how do you manipulate it depending on the team or the players you're working with?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, obviously, you kind of have to have a look out there and see what is there and kind of what is being practiced. Then from there, I think it depends on, you know, the environment you're in, what your culture is, and being respectful of, if you're going into a new environment or a new team, that you're not just coming in and saying, listen, whatever you're doing or whatever you've done previously is gone, and then just, you know, putting this model in place and kind of ramming it down the players' throats. But also being mindful of, you know, your philosophy and your ideas, and letting players experience, you know, what you want to do. You know, constant communication with the players and asking them their input in which way they want to do things. I think that then allows you to have your input, and saying, listen, for example, I've got 3 or 4 non-negotiables. This is the way I would like to do, so that it's more of a team environment and you're kind of guiding the process. I think from then, like I mentioned previously, you need to kind of have that, you know, kind of testing each model within your environment, see what works, see what doesn't work, and I think each kind of individual, I think everybody has their own truth, to find out what works for them, and then I think from there, if you are experiencing success, I think evaluating is so important individually and for the training program as well. Keeping notes, logging your training sessions, and also having a starting point and a reference, so that it's not just complete randomness. You're not just saying, right, I'll try that, put that, and it doesn't work. Always having that kind of football as a starting point, and the kind of hierarchy through attacking, defending, transition, and communication, decision making, football fitness. But I think, speaking about football periodisation model and the tactical periodisation model, for me, looking at it, I think even these two, you can use parts from each of them. I would certainly say the football periodisation model is definitely has its truths and its subjectivity. It's almost hard and fast rules, but obviously not everything is open to kind of interpretation. And then when you look at the tactical periodisation model, it does have an objective framework. And I've got a wee kind of framework that looks at the objective and subjective side of tactical periodisation. I can share with you guys, or kind of whatever if you've somewhere that you could kind of share it with the kind of network. So in say tactical periodisation, it basically shows you in an objective way how to frame, obviously, your tactics or your game model within your team. And then from there, the subjectivity through all the kind of different moments of the game, the kind of main principles and sub-principles, that then comes down to the pure subjectivity and ideas of the coach, which is basically the art of coaching, because there is an objective part of football where you can say, you know, this is the reference point, but there's also the huge subjective part is, how do you apply this? You know, and not everybody's application is the exact same. So obviously you've got all your kind of different sectors within your team collectively as an 11, through different intersectors and sectors within the team, and then individually. The biggest thing that I've picked up from tactical periodisation is a lot of people think it is just about the overall team. It is to an extent, but it is tactical periodisation in the game model allows each player within the team to have an idea of what each individual player is trying to do at every single moment within the game. So when I have the ball, I know exactly what the rest of my team are trying to do within that game because it's so specific. And because of that, the player is actually free to be more creative within their decisions, which then individually is going to help players in terms of their development. So it's just having an idea of each team function, so that the players know exactly what the team and individuals are trying to do within that game. And then based on that, the individual player is more free to have a better and higher level of quality decision making and creativity within that. So I think the football periodisation model is the overall kind of objective side of it. There is a kind of how do you apply that for each team. It's going to be different, but certainly tactical periodisation has its objectivity and subjectivity. And then you look at, just briefly, you mentioned the kind of cognitive side of tactical periodisation. It kind of takes in, for example, the kind of central fatigue. So after a game, for example, on a Sunday, players given them their absolute all, full 90 minutes. It's the most difficult part of the week. They're not just physically fatigued, they're also cognitively fatigued, and that kind of central nervous system emotionally fatigued. So football periodisation says that match day +1 is probably the best time to do a recovery session. Through recovering physically, but tactical periodisation goes on the idea that match day +2 is probably the best time to do your football recovery session. So Sunday game, day off on a Monday, train on a Tuesday would be your tactical periodisation model for players recover cognitively and emotionally. Football periodisation is more recovering from physical fatigue, which would be game Sunday, recovery session Monday to physically recover, and then allow the players to kind of have a day off on the Tuesday. So kind of some differences in there. And again, I think that's kind of what fits for your culture, what works for you, you know, testing things, try it, see how players react to it, allow them to have input, have your own ideas as well, and make sure that you implement it, but try and guide that as well.
Yeah, that cognitive is really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm guessing that changes as well depending on the game. So, for example, at a pro level, if you've had a really intense derby game and the results possibly not gone the way that you wanted it to go and things like that, there's going to be more emotional and cognitive fatigue, isn't there? Whereas other games, there might not be as much. So I'm guessing that just needs constant evaluation as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that, like you say, that's the kind of subjective application, you know, and having that, filtering your own experiences into that knowledge. And I think it's the same. It's not, I believe it's not just for players as well, you know, as coaches, when you're in that intense environment, you know, you're having games, weekend, midweek, constantly. You know, sometimes it's good just to have that, you know, if you're game one day, then you're back into a session, you're trying to analyse and kind of prepare for the next one. It's good just to have that that day off, just to kind of emotionally kind of sort out your brain and your thinking as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think many will relate to that.
Definitely.
Barry, I think there's some top stuff in there. I wanted to wrap up with the quick fire questions that I briefly warned you about at the start. They're not the hardest, but I think we get some decent information from these at the same time. So the first one is, who would you say, you can have a few on this one as well. So who would you say have been some of your biggest career influences?
Yeah, so I've had a couple. I'd certainly say a coach, head coach that I worked with at Glasgow City, Eddie Black. He's now the head coach at Motherwell. Took me under his wing right away. You know, first week I started working with him, he had me at his house for dinner. He really kind of gave me time. He wanted to kind of develop and help out, and really kind of finding out information from him and developing my coaching, but also how to kind of manage people and work with people as well. I'd certainly say he was one of the biggest influences.
And then the next one, what would you say your biggest strength is as a coach?
Biggest strength as a coach, I would certainly say probably planning and periodisation. I'm quite, I like the kind of organisation side of it. Certainly try to develop my tactical awareness. I'd say I'm within the kind of tactical awareness. I'd say I'm quite strong in terms of pattern recognition, and I've been able to zoom out within a game and kind of look at it from a kind of broader spectrum.
Awesome. Ties nicely in with the episode as well, so that's good news. Next one, what's some of the best CPD that you've done recently? So whether that's like an online webinar, or obviously we've not been to many courses recently, but have you got some CPD that stands out?
Yeah, I think I've done a recent one focusing on tactical periodisation. There's some good stuff out there. I'm sure you'll see it online. My Portuguese isn't great, but I think it's called Periodisation Táctica, and that's by Vita Frade. That was a good intro course. And then through the cancellation of the course I was supposed to be doing in Germany, I've been doing an online elite mentorship and pro course, which is quite intense. That's going to be for the next 13 months, and that's through FC Football Coach Evolution. So that's been quite a good, intense course that I've been doing recently.
Awesome. And then the final ones is the same question for two different people. So the biggest relatable or most relatable trait that you see in a coach?
Relatable trait. I think it's just trying to be understanding that some days you might not be better than the previous day, but just trying to be better than you were the kind of following day. Football is a really tough game. You know, the industry's a tough game. But I think it's just kind of having the belief in yourself and the optimism that you know, to stay in the game and just kind of give your all. You know, I think a lot of coaches can grind themselves down and, you know, get caught up and try to push themselves a lot. So I think it's important to kind of, you know, manage yourself personally, you know, and kind of periodise your coaching, if you want to kind of say it that way. Keep yourself fresh, you know, kind of look after your kind of well-being as well. So I think that's important in terms of a coaching trait.
And then the same question, but for a player. But I suppose with the player, it's sort of the traits that you'd like to see from a player.
Yeah, I think from that is you know, kind of having a buy-in to the environment that you're in, having an input in terms of how you want to see the culture that you're in, and what way you like to see that going. It's I think it was just a general one, but I think you can, as a coach, you can see the players who want to push themselves, for example, the players that come in and do one-to-ones with me and kind of the consultancy I give them, they're going out with their own team training to go and do extra. And for me, seeing players that want to do that, I think that's an important value.
Yeah, that's a great point. Awesome. Well, that's it. You're through the quick fire there, mate. I think they were really good. I think there's some top stuff in there. Like I said, we've had a number of messages about coaches in not in the professional game, in part-time football. So I think this episode really does relate to those guys as well as others that are in the full-time game as well. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Is there, if people have got questions, they want to reach out, they want to drop you a message, where's the best place to do that?
Probably best, you could probably catch me on LinkedIn, Ben. Obviously just simple search Barry Rodgers on LinkedIn. Kind of relatively active on there. Kind of reach out, drop me a message, or even email. I don't know if you just give my email. It's Barry Rodgers, and it's Rodgers with a D. BarryRodgers284@gmail.com. Kind of reach out. I'm happy to catch up or answer any questions.
Brilliant. Really appreciate that, and I'm sure there will be a few questions out there on certain things. So yeah, I encourage people to get in touch with yourself and get some conversations going about things. I think it's always good to follow up on these episodes. So, but again, Barry, thank you very much for coming on, and apologies for the months and months and months of trying to fit this in, but I delivered in the end. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Ben. It's great to be part of it. Football Fitness, we're doing great work for you guys, and I've been a follower for a while. So I'll be watching keenly and keeping up with what you guys are doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you, mate. We'll stay in touch.
Great. Cheers, Ben.
Thanks, Barry.